The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and the bustling lobby of Sterling Enterprises fell silent. Every conversation stopped, every coffee cup paused midway to lips, every keyboard went quiet. Alexander Sterling had arrived, but something was different. Very different. The man who usually commanded attention with his confident stride now sat in a sleek black wheelchair, pushed by his driver through the marble-floored entrance. His steel-gray eyes remained as sharp as ever, his tailored charcoal. Suit impeccable, but whispers began immediately. "What happened to him?" someone murmured. "Car accident?" Another voice suggested. "Maybe it's temporary," came a hopeful response. But Alexander heard every word. He had planned it this way. This wasn't about an injury or accident. This was about discovering the truth about the people around him, especially his new executive. Assistant Emma Rodriguez. 3 days earlier, Alexander had made a calculated decision. After his previous assistant betrayed company secrets to a competitor, he needed to know who could be trusted. The wheelchair wasn't real, it was a test. A way to see how people treated him when they perceived weakness. Emma had been hired just 1 week ago. Her resume was flawless. MBA from Harvard, 5 years at top consulting firms, impeccable references. But Alexander had learned that credentials meant nothing when it came to character. He needed to see her true maitre d' as the wheelchair approached the executive floor. Alexander's pulse quickened. Would Emma pity him? Would she suddenly become overly helpful? Would she see opportunity in his perceived vulnerability? Or worse, would she look at him differently, with that careful sympathy he'd witnessed in others' eyes? The elevator climbed steadily. 35th floor, 40th, 42nd, each number brought him closer to the moment of truth. Emma stood at her desk outside his corner office, organizing files for their morning meeting. Her long black hair was pulled into a professional bun, and she wore a navy blue dress that spoke of both elegance and competence. She had arrived an hour early, as she did every day, preparing for whatever challenges the morning might bring, when the elevator doors opened and Alexander appeared. In the wheelchair, Emma looked up from her papers. For a split second, her dark brown eyes showed surprise. Then something extraordinary happened. She didn't freeze. She didn't rush to help. She didn't offer sympathetic words or uncomfortable smiles. Instead, she stood, walked to his office door, and held it open with the same professional grace she had shown every other day. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice steady and warm. "Your 9 o'clock presentation materials are ready, and I've prepared the quarterly reports you requested." Alexander rolled into his office, studying Emma's every movement. She followed him in, closing the door behind them, and placed the files on his desk exactly as she always did. Her behavior remained unchanged, natural, respectful without being. "Pitying coffee?" she asked, moving toward the executive coffee machine in the corner. "Please," he replied, watching her carefully dot as Emma prepared his coffee black. No sugar, exactly as he preferred. Alexander found himself genuinely curious about her reaction. Or rather, her lack of reaction. Most people would have asked questions, offered help, or treated him like fragile glass. Emma simply continued her routine. She placed the coffee within easy reach and took her usual seat across from his desk, tablet ready for the morning briefing. The sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows highlighted the natural beauty of her face, but it was her composure that impressed him most. "The Morrison account needs your final approval," she began, pulling up documents on her tablet. "Legal has cleared the contract terms, and they're eager to move forward." For the next hour, they conducted business as usual. Emma asked intelligent questions, offered insightful suggestions, and handled every task with her typical efficiency. Not once did she mention the wheelchair or treat him any differently. During their second meeting of the day, with 3 department heads present, Alexander watched how Emma interacted with the others. When one executive seemed uncomfortable around the wheelchair, she smoothly redirected his attention to the presentation materials. When another tried to help Alexander reach a document, Emma quietly handed it to him instead, maintaining his dignity without drawing attention to the gesture. After the meeting, as the others filed out, Alexander called her back. "Emma, stay please." She turned, closing the door behind the last executive. "Yes, Mr. Sterling?" He leaned back in his wheelchair, studying her face. "You haven't asked any questions." "About what?" She replied, though her slight smile suggested she knew exactly what he meant. "About this," he gestured to the wheelchair. Emma clasped her hands in front of her, meeting his gaze directly. "I assumed if you wanted me to know, you would tell me. Your personal matters are private, unless they affect our work. And if they do affect our work, then we'll adapt and find solutions." She said simply, "That's what we do." Alexander felt something shift inside his chest. Her answer was neither dismissive nor overly accommodating. It was practical, respectful, and somehow deeply touching. "Most people would be curious," he said. Emma's expression softened slightly. "Curiosity and respect aren't mutually exclusive. Mr. Sterling, I can wonder about something while still honoring your privacy." That afternoon, Alexander found himself watching Emma through his office window as she worked at her desk. She fielded calls with patience, managed his calendar with precision, and treated every person who approached her desk with the same professional kindness. When a delivery person struggled with a large package, she helped without hesitation. When a nervous intern brought the wrong files, she guided him gently rather than criticizing. Her character revealed itself in these small moments, and Alexander began to realize that his test might be revealing more about him than about her. By the third day, Alexander's test had become something else entirely. What started as a calculated examination of Emma's character had evolved into something more personal. He found himself looking forward to their interactions, appreciating not just her professional competence, but her natural grace and warmth. Morning, Emma arrived with his usual coffee and the daily briefing, but something was different. She seemed more observant, her dark eyes studying him with quiet intelligence. "Mr. Sterling," she said after reviewing his schedule, "may I speak?" Candidly, his pulse quickened. Had she figured it out? Of course. Emma set down her tablet and moved closer to his desk, her voice lowering to ensure privacy. "I've been thinking about efficiency and accessibility in the office. There are a few adjustments we could make to improve workflow without drawing attention, or making anyone uncomfortable." She pulled out a folder with carefully prepared diagrams and suggestions. Lowering the presentation screen in the conference room by 6 inches would improve sightlines. Rearranging some furniture could create better navigation paths. Small changes that would benefit everyone. Alexander stared at the documents, amazed by her thoughtfulness. She had spent her own time considering how to make his work environment more comfortable, all while maintaining his dignity and privacy. "Emma, this is ... He began, then stopped, overwhelmed by an unexpected emotion. "I hope I haven't overstepped," she said quickly. "I just thought ... No," he said firmly. "This is incredibly thoughtful. Thank you." Their eyes met across the desk, and for a moment, the professional boundary between them seemed to blur. Emma's cheeks flushed slightly, and she looked down at her hands. "There's something else," she said softly. Alexander leaned forward, captivated by the change in her tone. Emma looked up, her brown eyes holding his gaze with surprising intensity. She moved even closer, placing her hand gently on his desk, and whispered words that would haunt him forever. "I know you're not really hurt, and I know this is a test. But I want you to know something. Your strength isn't in your legs or your ability to walk. It's in your heart, your mind, and the way you treat people. That's what makes you worth following, worth trusting, worth ... She paused, her voice catching slightly. Worth caring about. Alexander's world stopped. His breath caught in his throat, his heart hammered against his ribs, and every carefully constructed wall around his emotions crumbled in an instant. She knew. She had known all along, and yet she had never called him out, never made him feel foolish, never treated him with anything less than genuine respect and care. "Emma," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. But she wasn't finished. "I've watched you these past days, and I've seen something beautiful. Not a man in a wheelchair, not a CEO testing his staff, but a person who cares so deeply about trust and authenticity that he was willing to make himself vulnerable to find it." Tears pricked at the corners of Alexander's eyes. In 3 days, this extraordinary woman had seen through his deception, understood his motivation, and somehow fallen for the man he truly was beneath all the tests and barriers. The silence that followed Emma's whisper stretched between them like a bridge neither had expected to cross. Alexander sat motionless, his hands gripping the wheelchair's armrests as he processed the magnitude of what had just happened. "How long? Have you known?" he asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma straightened, her professional composure returning, but her eyes remained soft with the vulnerability she had just shared. "Since the second day. You moved your foot unconsciously when that file cabinet nearly fell. It was just for a second, but ... double quote, but you said nothing." "It wasn't my place to call out your methods," she replied. "I figured you had your reasons. And honestly, I was curious to see what you were looking for." Alexander shook his head in amazement. "And what do you think I was looking for?" "Someone who would see you for who you really are, not just what you appear to be," Emma said, her voice growing stronger. "Someone who would treat you with dignity, regardless of circumstances. Someone you could trust with your truth." The morning sun had shifted, casting new patterns of light across the office. Alexander realized that everything had changed in these few minutes. The test was over, but something infinitely more important had begun. "I've been burned before," he admitted, his voice heavy with old pain. "My previous assistant, other people. I trusted. I saw opportunity in my position, not partnership. I needed to know. If I was different," Emma finished gently. "Yes." He looked up at her, seeing her truly for the first time, not as an employee being evaluated, but as a woman who had just turned his world upside down with her wisdom and grace. "And you are. You're so different that I don't even know what to do with that information." Emma's smile was soft but radiant. "You don't have to do anything, Mr. Sterling. I didn't tell you because I expected something in return. I told you because you deserve to know that someone sees you clearly and chooses to stay anyway." Alexander felt his throat tighten with emotion. When was the last time someone had chosen him for himself, rather than what he could provide? When had anyone ever seen through his defenses and found him worthy of care? "Alexander," he said suddenly. "I'm sorry?" "My name. When we're alone, it's Alexander. I think we've moved past formalities." Emma's face lit up with a smile that transformed her entire appearance from beautiful to breathtaking. "Alexander," she repeated, and the sound of his name on her lips sent warmth spreading through his chest. "I need to tell you something else," he said, surprising himself with his honesty. "These past 3 days, watching you, working with you, it hasn't just been about the test anymore. You've impressed me, challenged me, made me feel things I didn't expect to feel." Emma's breath caught. "Alexander ... I know this complicates everything," he continued. "The workplace, the professional relationship, the fact that I've been essentially lying to you for 3 days." "You weren't lying," Emma said firmly. "You were protecting yourself." "There's a difference." The compassion in her voice nearly undid him. How are you so understanding about this? Emma looked out the window at the city beyond, gathering her thoughts. My father died when I was 16. Massive heart attack, completely unexpected. For months afterward, people treated me differently. They whispered when I walked by, offered help I didn't need, looked at me with pity instead of seeing me as the same person I'd always been. She turned back to him. I learned that people's reactions to your circumstances often say more about them than about you. I chose to see the man, not the situation. Alexander felt his heart break open in the most beautiful way. This woman had endured her own losses, her own tests, and had emerged with a capacity for understanding that astounded him. That evening, Alexander made a decision that surprised even him. Instead of going home to his empty penthouse, he asked Emma to join him for dinner. Not as boss and employee, but as two people who had found something unexpected in each other. They went to a quiet restaurant downtown, one where Alexander could walk in without the wheelchair, without the pretense. As they settled into a corner booth, Emma looked at him with obvious appreciation. It's good to see you as yourself, she said, her smile warm and genuine. I'm not sure I've been myself with anyone in years, Alexander admitted. Until this week, until you. They talked through dinner about everything except work. Emma shared stories of growing up with her grandmother after her father's death, her dreams of traveling, her love of old movies and good books. Alexander found himself opening up about his loneliness, his difficulty trusting people, his fear that his wealth and position made genuine connection impossible. You know what I realized today? Emma said as they shared dessert. Your test revealed something you didn't expect. What's that? That you're not just looking for someone trustworthy to work with. You're looking for someone who can see the real you and choose to stay. Someone who won't run when you show them your vulnerabilities. Alexander reached across the table and took her hand, marveling at how perfectly it fit in his. And are you? Staying, I mean? Emma's eyes sparkled with mischief and affection. Tried to get rid of me. I don't want to, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Emma, I know this is complicated. I know there are professional considerations in power dynamics and 100 reasons why we should be careful. But, she prompted, her thumb tracing gentle circles on his hand, but I've never felt this connected to anyone. In 3 days, you've seen through every defense I've built, called me on my nonsense, and somehow made me feel more valued than I ever have. If that's not worth fighting for, I don't know what is. Emma leaned forward, her free hand coming up to touch his cheek gently. Alexander Sterling, you magnificent, complicated man. You spent 3 days testing me, but you ended, revealing your own heart. And what did I reveal? He whispered. That underneath all the power and success and careful control, you're just a man who wants to be loved for who he really is. And the beautiful truth is, you are. You absolutely are. When Alexander kissed her in that restaurant, surrounded by the soft murmur of other diners and the gentle clink of glasses, he felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Home. Not the building where he lived, not the office where he worked, but the feeling of being completely known and completely accepted. Later, as he walked Emma to her car, she turned to him with a soft smile. Thank you, she said. For what? For trusting me with your test, for letting me see the real you, for being brave enough to let someone in. Alexander pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her perfume, feeling the solid reality of her in his arms. Thank you for passing a test you didn't even know you were taking, and for teaching me that sometimes the best discoveries happen when we stop looking so hard and start trusting our hearts. As Emma drove away that night, Alexander stood on the sidewalk, watching her taillights disappear into traffic. Tomorrow, they would have to navigate the complexities of a workplace romance, figure out professional boundaries, and deal with the inevitable gossip. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, a man who had spent years building walls around his heart had found someone worth tearing them down for. And a woman who had chosen compassion over judgment had discovered that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the simplest choice: to see someone clearly and love them anyway. The test was over. The love story had just begun.